My son-in-law was on the verge of dying and needed a kidney. My daughter told me, "It's your duty to be useful to the man of the family." The doctor was about to operate on me when my 7-year-old grandson screamed, "Grandpa, do you want to know the truth about why he really needs this?" I froze at the revelation. "I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. I always thought Maya had the perfect marriage. 23 years of what seemed like pure happiness with Walter, raising my grandson Tommy in a beautiful suburban home with a white picket fence and everything. As a father, watching your daughter succeed in life is supposed to be your greatest achievement. But that Tuesday morning when Maya called me with tears in her voice, everything I believed about my perfect family started to crumble. "Dad, I need you to sit down," Maya said, her voice shaking through the phone. I was in my kitchen, making my usual morning coffee, when her call came through at 7:30 in the morning. Something about her tone made my stomach drop immediately. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" I asked, settling into my old leather chair that my late wife Sarah had always said I should replace. "It's Walter, Dad. He's really sick." The way she said it, with that pause and the tremor in her voice, told me this wasn't just a cold or even the flu. My heart started pounding. Walter had always been like a son to me. From the day Maya brought him home 15 years ago, he'd been nothing but respectful, hardworking, and devoted to my daughter. He worked long hours at the construction company to provide for their family, never complained, always had a smile and a firm handshake for me. "How sick, Maya?" I asked, though I was afraid of the answer. "His kidneys are failing, Dad. Both of them. The doctors say he needs a transplant, and soon," or she trailed off, but I could hear her crying softly. I felt like someone had punched me in the chest. Walter was only 42 years old. How does a healthy man in his prime suddenly develop kidney failure? It didn't make sense, but then again, life rarely does. "Okay, sweetheart, okay. What do we need to do? What are the options?" I was already thinking about specialists, second opinions, whatever it would take. "Well, that's why I'm calling, Dad." Maya's voice got steadier, more determined. "The doctors say the best chance is a living donor, someone from the family, and you're the only one who's a potential match." The silence stretched between us for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. Me. She was asking me to give Walter one of my kidneys. "The thing is, Dad," Maya continued, "time is really critical here. We can't wait for the donor list. That could take years, and Walter doesn't have years. The doctors said if we don't act fast, we could lose him." I thought about Tommy, my 7-year-old grandson who idolized his father. I thought about Maya, who had already lost her mother 3 years ago to cancer. How could I let her lose her husband too? "Of course," I heard myself saying. "Of course I'll get tested. When do we start?" "Really, Dad?" The relief in Maya's voice was palpable. "I knew I could count on you. You've always been our hero. You know that. Walter is going to be so grateful." But something about the way she said it bothered me. There was something rehearsed about her words, like she'd practiced this conversation. I shook off the feeling. My daughter was scared and desperate. Of course, she'd been thinking about how to have this difficult conversation. "When do I need to go to the hospital?" I asked. "Actually, I've already made you an appointment for this afternoon. Dr. Richardson at Memorial Hospital, 2 o'clock. Is that okay?" I paused. She'd already made the appointment before calling me, before even asking if I'd be willing. Again, I pushed down the uneasy feeling. Maya was just being proactive. She knew I'd want to help. "That's fine, sweetheart. Should I meet you there?" "Yes, Walter and I will be waiting for you in the lobby. And Dad, thank you. You're literally saving his life." After I hung up, I sat in that chair for another 20 minutes, staring at my coffee as it grew cold. Something felt off, but I couldn't put my finger on what. Maybe it was just the shock of the news. Walter had seemed fine at Tommy's birthday party just 2 weeks ago. He'd been laughing, playing catch with Tommy in the backyard, even helped me move some furniture around. At 2 o'clock sharp, I walked into Memorial Hospital's lobby. Maya spotted me immediately and rushed over, but something about her demeanor was different. She seemed nervous, almost jumpy. "Dad, thank you so much for coming," she said, giving me a quick hug, but her eyes kept darting around the lobby instead of meeting mine directly. Walter was sitting in a chair near the window, and when he saw me, he stood up slowly. That's when I got my first real shock. He looked terrible. His skin had a grayish tint, and he seemed to have lost at least 20 pounds since I'd last seen him. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his clothes hung loose on his frame. "Joseph," he said, extending his hand. His grip was weak, nothing like the firm handshakes I was used to from him. "Walter, my God, why didn't you tell me you were feeling this sick?" I asked. He glanced quickly at Maya before answering. "I didn't want to worry anyone. You know how I am about being a burden." But that didn't sound like Walter at all. He'd never been the type to suffer in silence. When he'd broken his arm 2 years ago, he'd called me himself to let me know he might need help with some projects around their house. Dr. Richardson turned out to be a serious man in his 50s with graying hair and tired eyes. He explained the testing process to me in his office while Maya and Walter waited outside. "Mr. Joseph, I have to ask, are you absolutely certain you want to proceed with this? Living kidney donation is major surgery, and at 59, there are always additional risks to consider. Doctor, Walter is like a son to me. If I can help him, I will." Dr. Richardson nodded slowly. "I understand. We'll need to run extensive tests, blood work, imaging, psychological evaluation. The whole process usually takes several weeks, but Mrs. Maya has requested we expedite everything given the urgency of her husband's condition." Again, Maya had already made arrangements before consulting me. I was starting to feel like I was being swept along in a current I couldn't control. As we walked back to the lobby after scheduling my tests, I noticed something else strange. Maya kept steering the conversation away whenever I asked specific questions about Walter's condition. When I asked what had caused the kidney failure, she'd change the subject. When I wondered aloud about his symptoms, she'd suddenly remember something else we needed to discuss. And Walter himself seemed almost absent from these conversations, letting Maya do all the talking. The few times he did speak, he sounded rehearsed, like he was reciting lines he'd memorized. But the strangest thing happened as we were leaving the hospital. Tommy came running up to us from where he'd been sitting with Maya's friend Jennifer in the coffee shop. "Grandpa Joe!" he called out, using the nickname he'd given me when he was 3. He threw his arms around my waist, but instead of his usual cheerful chatter, he looked up at me with serious eyes. "Grandpa, can I talk to you?" he asked quietly. "Of course, buddy. What's on your mind?" But before Tommy could say another word, Maya was there, her hand on his shoulder. "Tommy, sweetie, Grandpa needs to get home and rest before his big appointment tomorrow. You can talk to him later." Something flickered across Tommy's face. Disappointment, maybe, or frustration, but he just nodded and stepped back. As I drove home that evening, I couldn't shake the feeling that everyone in my family was keeping secrets from me. The whole situation felt wrong somehow, but I couldn't figure out why. Walter was clearly sick. I could see that with my own eyes. Maya was obviously terrified of losing her husband, and I was the only one who could help. So why did I feel like I was walking into a trap? The next few days at the hospital were a blur of tests, needles, and waiting rooms. Blood draws, x-rays, CT scans, psychological evaluations. They poked and prodded every part of me to make sure I was healthy enough to give Walter one of my kidneys. Maya accompanied me to every single appointment, which I initially thought was sweet of her. But as the days wore on, her constant presence started to feel more like surveillance than support. What bothered me most was how she positioned herself between me and the medical staff. Every time a nurse or technician started to make conversation about the case, Maya would quickly redirect the discussion. When Dr. Martinez, the kidney specialist, began explaining Walter's medical history during one of my consultations, Maya interrupted with questions about my own health instead. "Dad's had high blood pressure in the past," she said, even though my blood pressure had been normal for years. "Shouldn't we be focusing on whether he's healthy enough for surgery?" Dr. Martinez looked confused. "Actually, Mr. Joseph's current blood pressure readings are excellent. I was just providing context about your husband's condition so your father understands what we're dealing with." "Right, of course," Maya said quickly. "I just worry about Dad, you know. He's not getting any younger." I felt a flush of irritation. "I'm 59, Maya, not 90. I think I can handle hearing about Walter's medical situation." But Maya had already moved on, asking Dr. Martinez about surgical procedures and recovery times. The moment to learn more about Walter's condition had passed. Later that day, as I was getting dressed after another round of tests, I overheard 2 nurses talking in the hallway outside my room. "Poor guy," one of them said quietly. "He has no idea what he's getting into." "The family dynamics are always the hardest part of these cases," the other replied. "Sometimes the donors aren't given the full picture." Their voices faded as they walked away, but their words stuck with me. What full picture? What wasn't I being told? That evening, I decided to do something I probably should have done from the beginning. I called Walter directly instead of going through Maya. I wanted to hear from him personally how he was feeling, what the doctors had told him about his condition. The phone rang 4 times before Walter answered, and when he did, his voice sounded strange, slurred almost, like he was drowsy. "Oh, hey Joseph," he said slowly. "What's up?" "I just wanted to check on you, see how you're holding up. This must be incredibly scary for you." There was a long pause. "Yeah, it's been rough. Really rough." "When did you first start noticing symptoms?" I asked. Maya mentioned the doctors said this came on quickly. Another pause, longer this time. Symptoms, right. Well, I've been tired, really tired, and my back's been hurting." Something about his responses felt off. Walter was usually articulate, engaged. This version of him seemed distant, almost like he was reading from a script he couldn't quite remember. "Have you been in pain? Are you on medication for it?" "Medication, yeah. Lots of medication. Makes me pretty foggy, you know?" That would explain the slurred speech, I thought. But it didn't explain the vague, almost evasive answers to my questions. "Walter, I want you to know that I'm doing this because I care about you. You're family to me. But I also want to make sure I understand exactly what's happening so I can be prepared." "I know, Joseph, I know. And I'm grateful, really grateful." "Maya says the surgery's scheduled for next week?" I hadn't known that. Maya hadn't mentioned a specific date to me yet. "Is it?" "She hasn't told me when." "Oh, maybe I misunderstood. This medication really messes with my head." After I hung up, I felt more confused than ever. Something about that conversation didn't sit right with me. Walter seemed to know less about his own condition than I did, which made no sense. The next morning, I arrived at the hospital for what Dr. Richardson had called my final pre-surgical consultation. As I was checking in at the reception desk, I noticed the woman behind the counter looking at her computer screen with a puzzled expression. "Mr. Joseph, I'm sorry, but I'm having trouble finding your appointment in our system." "It should be under Dr. Richardson, 9 o'clock, I said. She typed for a moment, then frowned. "I see a note here that your appointment was moved to Dr. Stevens in the nephrology department, but there's no appointment time listed." Maya appeared at my elbow. "Oh, there was a scheduling conflict. Dr. Stevens is Walter's primary kidney specialist. He wanted to see you personally before the surgery." How had Maya known about the scheduling change when I didn't? And why wasn't I told directly? Dr. Stevens turned out to be a younger man, probably in his early 40s, with an intense demeanor that immediately put me on edge. His office was smaller than Dr. Richardson's and he seemed rushed, constantly checking his watch. "Mr. Joseph, thank you for coming in. I just need to go over a few final details with you before we proceed. I'd like to ask some questions about Walter's condition first, if that's okay," I said. Dr. Stevens glanced at Maya, who was sitting beside me. "Of course. What would you like to know?" "Well, for starters, what caused his kidney failure? Was it genetic, an illness, an injury?" Another glance at Maya. "Mr. Walter's case is somewhat complex. Multiple contributing factors, such as, well, there was some trauma to the kidneys and underlying health issues that compounded the problem." His answers were as vague as everyone else's had been. I was getting frustrated. "Doctor, I'm about to undergo major surgery to help this man. I think I deserve to know exactly what happened to him." Dr. Stevens shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Mr. Joseph, patient confidentiality prevents me from sharing specific details without Mr. Walter's explicit consent. But Walter is my son-in-law. Surely he's given consent for me to know about his condition." "Actually," Maya interjected quickly, "Walter's been very private about his medical details. He's embarrassed about some aspects of his condition. You know how proud he is." That was the first thing Maya had said that actually sounded like the Walter I knew. He was proud, almost to a fault sometimes. "What's there to be embarrassed about?" I asked. "Kidney disease isn't something to be ashamed of." Dr. Stevens and Maya exchanged another look. The pattern of these quick glances between them was starting to really bother me. "Sometimes patients feel responsible for their health problems," Dr. Stevens said carefully, "even when they shouldn't." As we left the hospital that day, I made a decision. I was going to stop by Maya and Walter's house unannounced that evening. I wanted to see Walter in his home environment, talk to him without Maya managing every word of our conversation. But when I arrived at their house at 6:30, no one answered the door. Both cars were in the driveway, so I knew they were home. I could hear the television playing inside, and I saw movement through the living room window. I rang the doorbell again and waited. Finally, Maya opened the door, but she only opened it a crack, keeping the chain lock engaged. "Dad, what are you doing here?" "I wanted to check on Walter. See how he's feeling before the surgery. This isn't a good time. He's resting. The medication makes him really drowsy in the evenings. I'll just say a quick hello. I won't stay long." "Dad, please, he needs his rest. Can you come back tomorrow?" But as she was speaking, I heard Tommy's voice from inside the house, clear as day. "Mom, why can't Grandpa come in? Dad's not even sleeping." Maya's face went white. "Tommy, go to your room," she called over her shoulder. "But Mom..." "Now, Tommy." She turned back to me, forcing a smile. "Kids, you know, they don't understand when people are sick." But Tommy's words echoed in my mind as I drove home. Dad's not even sleeping. Why would Maya lie about Walter resting if he was awake? That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. Every interaction I'd had with my family over the past week felt orchestrated, controlled. Every medical professional I'd spoken with had been evasive about Walter's condition, and now Maya was keeping me away from Walter entirely. Something was very wrong here. And tomorrow, I was supposed to go under the knife to give my kidney to a man whose illness seemed to be surrounded by secrets and lies. I picked up my phone and scrolled to Tommy's contact. Maya had given me his number last year when she wanted me to be able to reach him directly in emergencies. Maybe it was time to use it. The morning of my surgery, I woke up at 5:30 with a knot in my stomach that had nothing to do with pre-operative nerves. I'd barely slept, replaying every strange conversation, every evasive answer, every uncomfortable glance between Maya and the doctors. Something was seriously wrong, and I was about to find out what it was in the most dramatic way possible. I arrived at the hospital at 6:15, earlier than my scheduled 7 o'clock check-in time. Maya and Walter were already there, sitting in the pre-surgical waiting area. Walter looked even worse than he had the week before. His skin had taken on an almost yellow tint, and his hands were shaking slightly as he held his coffee cup. "Dad, you're early," Maya said, standing to hug me. But her embrace felt stiff, perfunctory. "Couldn't sleep," I admitted. "Nervous, I guess." "That's completely normal," she said, but she wouldn't meet my eyes. "The nurses will take you back soon to get you prepped." As we sat there waiting, I watched Walter carefully. Something about his appearance bothered me beyond just looking sick. Then it hit me. His symptoms looked more like withdrawal than kidney disease. The shaking hands, the yellowed skin, the way he kept fidgeting and checking his watch. I'd seen enough construction workers over the years struggling with various addictions to recognize the signs, but I pushed the thought away. This was my son-in-law, a man I'd known for 15 years. Surely I would have noticed if he had a substance abuse problem. At 7:15, a nurse named Patricia came to escort me to the pre-op area. As we walked down the hallway, she made casual conversation. "So this is wonderful what you're doing for your son-in-law," she said. "It's always inspiring to see family members step up like this." "Well, Walter's been like a son to me," I replied. "I just hope everything goes smoothly." "Oh, I'm sure it will. Dr. Stevens has done several of these procedures recently, though I have to say your case is a bit unusual." I stopped walking. "Unusual how?" Patricia looked uncomfortable, like she'd said something she shouldn't have. "Oh, just the timeline. Usually these family donations take months to arrange, but your daughter was very insistent about expediting everything. The doctor said Walter's condition was critical," I said. "Yes, that's what I understand." But something in her tone suggested she had doubts about that assessment. In the pre-op room, I changed into a hospital gown and settled onto the narrow bed. A different nurse came in to start my IV and go through the final checklist. As she was checking my identification bracelet, she frowned. "Mr. Joseph, I need to ask you something, and please don't take this the wrong way. Are you absolutely certain you want to proceed with this surgery?" "What do you mean?" She glanced toward the door, then lowered her voice. "Sometimes family members feel pressured into donation. If you have any doubts at all, any concerns, now is the time to speak up." "Is there something specific I should be concerned about?" Before she could answer, Maya appeared in the doorway. "How are we doing in here?" she asked brightly, but her eyes were sharp, focused on the nurse. "Just finishing up the pre-op checklist," the nurse replied, her professional demeanor returning immediately. After the nurse left, Maya sat down beside my bed. Dad, I can't tell you how much this means to us. To Walter, to Tommy, to me. You're literally saving our family. Maya, can I ask you something? Of course. What exactly caused Walter's kidney failure? She hesitated for just a moment too long. I told you it was sudden. The doctor said it was probably a combination of factors. What factors? Dad, why are you asking so many questions? Don't you trust the doctors? I trust the doctors fine. I'm asking you. Maya's jaw tightened slightly. It was probably genetic predisposition combined with some lifestyle factors. High blood pressure, poor diet, stress from work. But none of that explained the rapid deterioration, or why Walter looked more like someone in withdrawal than someone with kidney disease. Maya, has Walter been drinking heavily? The question came out before I could stop myself. Maya's face went completely white. Dad, what kind of question is that? It's a simple question. Has he been drinking more than usual? Walter barely drinks at all. You know that. But I didn't know that. I realized I actually knew very little about Walter's habits when he wasn't around family. And the more I thought about it, the more I remembered small things. Empty beer bottles in their recycling bin when I'd helped with yard work. The way Walter sometimes seemed different at family gatherings. More talkative or more withdrawn than usual. At 8:30, Dr. Stevens came in to speak with me one final time before surgery. Maya immediately stood up. Doctor, is everything on schedule? Yes. We should be ready to begin in about 30 minutes. He turned to me. Mr. Joseph, do you have any final questions before we proceed? Actually, I do. Dr. Stevens, I'd like you to be completely honest with me about Walter's condition. What really caused his kidney failure? Dr. Stevens glanced at Maya, and I saw that same quick look pass between them that I'd been noticing all week. As I explained before, it was likely a combination of factors. Doctor, I'm about to undergo major surgery. I think I deserve a straight answer. Was alcohol involved? The silence in the room was deafening. Doctor? Stephen shifted uncomfortably and Maya's breathing became audible. Mr. Joseph, patient confidentiality. Stop hiding behind confidentiality, I said, my voice rising. I want to know what I'm getting into here. Before Dr. Stevens could respond, there was a commotion in the hallway outside my room. I could hear a child's voice, upset and crying. Then the door burst open, and Tommy ran in, his face streaked with tears. Grandpa Joe, don't let them do it. Maya immediately moved toward him. Tommy, you're not supposed to be here. Who brought you? Aunt Jennifer dropped me off. She said I could see Grandpa before his surgery. Tommy, sweetie, you need to wait in the family room. No! Tommy shouted, and the desperation in his voice made everyone in the room freeze. Grandpa, I have to tell you something. I have to tell you the truth. Tommy, that's enough, Maya said sharply, reaching for his arm. But Tommy dodged away from her and ran to my bedside. He grabbed my hand with both of his small ones, his eyes wide and frightened. Grandpa, do you want to know the real truth about why Dad needs your kidney? The room went completely silent. Maya was standing frozen by the door, her face pale as paper. Dr. Stevens looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. What truth, buddy? I asked gently, though my heart was pounding. Tommy looked at his mother, then back at me. Dad's not really sick, Grandpa. Not the way they told you. Tommy, stop right now, Maya said, her voice shaking. But Tommy kept talking, the words tumbling out of him like water through a broken dam. Dad hurt his kidneys because he drinks too much. And he takes pills. Mom found bottles hidden all over the house, and she said you would never help if you knew the truth, so we had to pretend it was just regular sick. The world seemed to stop spinning. I felt like I'd been punched in the chest, all the air leaving my lungs at once. Tommy, that's not... Maya started. It is true, Mom. I heard you and Dad talking about it. You said Grandpa would never give his kidney to an addict, so you had to make up a story about him being sick from something else. I looked at Maya, and in her expression, I saw the confirmation of everything Tommy had just said. The guilt, the fear, the desperate calculation of someone whose lies had just been exposed. Maya, I said quietly, is this true? She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Dr. Stevens cleared his throat. Mr. Joseph, perhaps we should postpone the surgery until... Is it true? I repeated, my voice stronger now. Maya's shoulders sagged, and suddenly she looked smaller, defeated. Dad, Walter is sick. He really is. His kidneys are failing because of alcohol and drug abuse. A long pause, Then, barely audible, yes, the betrayal hit me like a physical blow. Not just that Walter had addiction problems, that was something we could have worked through as a family, but that Maya had lied to me, manipulated me, played on my love for them to trick me into major surgery. How long? I asked. How long what? How long has he been using? Maya's eyes filled with tears. A few years. It got really bad after he hurt his back at work. The pills for pain, then drinking to sleep. I kept thinking he'd get better, that I could help him stop. And when did you decide to lie to me about it? Dad, we were desperate. Walter could die without a transplant, and we knew you'd never agree if you knew the whole truth. I stared at my daughter, this woman I'd raised to value honesty and integrity, and realized I didn't recognize her anymore. Get out, I said quietly. Dad, get out of my room, now. Maya started crying, but she didn't move. Dad, please. Walter really could die. Whatever mistakes he's made, he's still Tommy's father. He's still my husband. I looked at Tommy, who was still holding my hand, his small face full of confusion and fear. Tommy, you did the right thing telling me the truth, I said. You're a brave boy. Then I looked back at Maya. I said, get out. This time she left, sobbing as she walked down the hallway. Dr. Stevens lingered for a moment. Mr. Joseph, we'll need to cancel today's surgery. Given these circumstances? Yes, I said. Cancel it. Cancel everything. As the medical team filed out of my room, I sat there in my hospital gown, holding my grandson's hand, trying to process what had just happened. The people I loved most in the world had been willing to put me through major surgery based on a lie. They'd seen me not as a father and grandfather who deserved the truth, but as a convenient solution to a problem they'd created. But as I looked at Tommy's worried face, I realized that this betrayal, as painful as it was, had also set me free. 20 minutes after Maya left my hospital room, she was back. But this time, she wasn't alone. Walter was with her, looking even more desperate than before, and behind them stood Jennifer, Maya's best friend who had apparently brought Tommy to the hospital. Dad, please, Maya said before she was even fully through the door. Just hear us out. I was still sitting on the edge of the hospital bed, having refused to change back into my street clothes. Something about staying in the hospital gown felt appropriate, a reminder of how close I'd come to being deceived into surgery. There's nothing to hear, I said evenly. You lied to me. Walter stepped forward, and I could see his hands shaking even more than before. Joseph, I know this looks bad. I know I should have been honest from the beginning, but I really am dying. Are you? I asked. Or are you just finally facing the consequences of your choices? Walter flinched like I'd slapped him. That's not fair. What's not fair is lying to me for 2 weeks. What's not fair is manipulating me into major surgery. What's not fair is using a 7-year-old boy as your conscience. Dad, we were scared, Maya said, tears streaming down her face. We didn't know what else to do. I stood up and walked over to where Tommy was sitting in the corner chair, clearly uncomfortable with the adult drama unfolding around him. I knelt down beside him. Tommy, do you want to go get some juice from the vending machine? Give the grown-ups a chance to talk? He nodded eagerly and slipped out of the room. Once he was gone, I turned back to Maya and Walter. How long have you known? I asked Walter directly. Known what? That your kidneys were failing because of alcohol and pills. Walter looked at Maya, but she just stared at the floor. Finally, he answered, About 6 months ago. The doctor said if I didn't stop drinking and get clean, I'd need a transplant within a year. And did you stop? Another long pause. I tried. That's not what I asked. No, Walter said quietly. I couldn't stop. I wanted to, but I couldn't. At least that was honest. I felt a small flicker of something. Not forgiveness exactly, but recognition that addiction was a disease, even if I didn't approve of how they'd handled it. Maya, when did you decide to lie to me about the cause? Maya finally looked up, her face blotchy from crying. When the doctor said Walter needed a transplant. We knew you'd want to help if you thought it was just bad luck or genetics, but if you knew Walter had caused it himself, you thought I'd refuse. Yes, you were right. I would have refused. The words hung in the air between us. Maya's face crumpled and Walter actually staggered backward like I'd hit him. But, I continued, that would have been my choice to make, based on the truth, not on some elaborate fiction you created. Dad, I know we were wrong, Maya said. But people don't get second chances when it comes to organ donation. The waiting lists, the requirements. If Walter was an active addict, he'd never qualify. This was his only option. So you made me his only option without telling me. We were trying to save his life. I felt anger rising in my chest, hot and sharp. No, Maya. You were trying to save your marriage. There's a difference. Maya recoiled like I'd struck her. That's not true, isn't it? Tell me, what was your plan for after the surgery? Was Walter going to get clean then? Was he going to stop drinking and using pills? Or were you just hoping that a new kidney would buy you more time to keep pretending everything was fine? The silence that followed told me everything I needed to know. You don't have a plan, I said. You never did. You were just hoping that if you could get him the transplant, somehow everything else would work itself out. Walter cleared his throat. Joseph, I want to get clean, I really do. I just can't seem to do it on my own. Then get help. Real help. Check yourself into a treatment program. Go to meetings. See a counselor. But don't ask me to risk my life and my health to enable your addiction. It's not enabling, Maya protested. It's saving his life. It's both, I said firmly, and I won't be part of it. Jennifer, who had been quietly standing by the door this whole time, finally spoke up. Joseph, I know this is hard to hear, but Maya's been covering for Walter for years. This isn't the first time he's promised to get clean. Maya spun around. Jennifer, stay out of this. No, I won't stay out of it, Jennifer said, her voice getting stronger. Someone needs to tell the truth here. Walter's been in and out of trouble with drinking and pills for the past 3 years. Maya's been making excuses, hiding bottles, covering for him at work when he doesn't show up. She's been living in denial, and now she's trying to drag you into it too. Jennifer, you don't understand, Maya started. I understand perfectly, Jennifer interrupted. I've watched you sacrifice everything for a man who won't help himself. Your savings account, your credit rating, your relationship with your father. And now you want Joseph to risk his health too? I looked at Maya with new eyes. Is that true? About your finances? Maya's shoulders sagged. We've had some struggles. What kind of struggles? Walter missed a lot of work, and the medical bills and some other debts. What other debts? Walter spoke up. I owe some money to people. For pills. The room went cold. What kind of people, Walter? Just guys who helped me out when I couldn't get prescriptions anymore. Drug dealers. My son-in-law owed money to drug dealers. And my daughter had been trying to solve this problem by getting me to give him a kidney. I sat back down on the hospital bed, feeling suddenly exhausted. How much money? About $15,000, Maya said quietly. Jesus Christ. I ran my hands through my hair. Maya, this is so much worse than just addiction. You're in over your heads. That's why we need your help, Dad. Not just with the kidney, but with everything. We need to start over, and we can't do that if Walter dies. I looked at my daughter. Really looked at her. Her clothes were wrinkled and didn't fit quite right, like she'd lost weight recently. Her hair needed cutting, and she wasn't wearing the jewelry I'd given her for Christmas. Probably sold it. She looked like a woman hanging on by her fingernails. And Walter looked like exactly what he was, a man in the grip of addiction, desperate and sick and willing to let his family sacrifice everything to avoid facing his problems. Maya, I love you, I said finally. I've loved you since the day you were born, but I can't save you from this. You can, Dad. You're the only one who can. I shook my head. No, sweetheart. Saving you would be standing by and watching while you and Walter destroy yourselves and Tommy gets caught in the crossfire. Saving you would be enabling Walter's addiction and teaching Tommy that lies and manipulation are okay if you're desperate enough. So what are you saying? I took a deep breath. I'm saying that if Walter wants my kidney, he needs to get clean first. Real clean, not just promises. 6 months minimum in a treatment program with ongoing counseling and support group attendance. And you need to stop making excuses for him and get some help yourself. Maya's face hardened. 6 months? Dad, he might not have 6 months. Then he'd better start treatment today. And if he dies while he's getting clean? The question hung in the air between us like a blade. I felt the weight of it, the impossible choice they were trying to force on me. Maya, if Walter dies because he's finally facing the consequences of his addiction, that's tragic. But it's not my fault. And it's not my responsibility to prevent it by risking my own life. Walter started crying then. Not the quiet tears of earlier, but deep, ugly sobs that shook his whole body. I'm sorry, Joseph. I'm so sorry. I never wanted it to go this far. I believed him. I believed he was sorry, and I believed he'd never intended for things to get this bad. But intention wasn't the same as action, and sorry wasn't the same as change. Walter, being sorry isn't enough anymore. You need to get help. What if I can't? What if I try and fail again? Then you fail. But at least you'll have tried honestly, instead of asking your family to lie and sacrifice for you. I stood up and walked to the small closet where my clothes were hanging. I'm going home now. Tommy can come with me if he wants to. You two need to decide what you're going to do next. As I started changing back into my street clothes, Maya made one last desperate attempt. Dad, if you walk away now, you might never see Walter again. Is that really what you want? I paused, my shirt halfway on. Maya, I've already lost the Walter I thought I knew. He's been gone for years, and you've been hiding that from me. At least now, I know the truth. When I was fully dressed, I opened the door to find Tommy sitting on a bench in the hallway, a juice box in his hands. Ready to go, buddy? I asked. He nodded and stood up, but then he looked back at the room where his parents were still standing. Grandpa Joe, are Mom and Dad going to be okay? I knelt down to his level and put my hands on his shoulders. I don't know, Tommy, but I know that you're going to be okay, and sometimes that's all we can control. As we walked down the hospital corridor together, Tommy slipped his small hand into mine. Behind us, I could hear Maya crying, but I didn't look back. For the first time in 2 weeks, I knew I was making the right choice. The drive home from the hospital was quiet, except for the soft sound of Tommy humming in the back seat. I kept glancing at him in the rearview mirror, this little boy who had shown more courage and integrity in one morning than the adults in his life had shown in months. When we pulled into my driveway, he unbuckled his seatbelt and looked at me with those serious brown eyes. Grandpa Joe, am I going to live with you now? The question hit me harder than I'd expected. For today, yes. We'll figure out the rest as we go along. That evening, while Tommy was watching cartoons in my living room, my phone started ringing. First Maya, then Walter, then Maya again. I let them all go to voicemail. When I finally listened to the messages later, they ranged from tearful apologies to angry accusations to desperate pleading. Dad, please call me back. We need to talk about Tommy. You can't just take him. Joseph, this is Walter. I know you're angry, but we can work this out. I'll get help, I promise. Dad, you're breaking up our family. Is that really what you want? I deleted each message after listening to it. I wasn't ready to have that conversation yet. I needed time to think, to process what had happened, to figure out how to move forward. 3 days later, Maya showed up at my front door. I could see her through the peephole, standing on my porch in wrinkled clothes, her hair unwashed. She looked like she hadn't slept since I'd left the hospital. I opened the door but didn't invite her in. Maya, Dad, we need to talk. Tommy belongs with his parents. Tommy belongs with people who will tell him the truth and keep him safe. Right now, that appears to be me. You can't just decide to keep my son. I'm not keeping him. I'm providing him with a stable place to stay while his parents figure out their problems. Maya's composure cracked. Walter's in the hospital again. His kidneys are getting worse. The doctors say he has maybe 2 weeks before he needs dialysis. I felt a pang of something. Not guilt exactly, but sadness. I'm sorry to hear that. Dad, he's going to die. Maya, people don't die from kidney failure in 2 weeks. They go on dialysis, and they get on the transplant waiting list, and they wait like everyone else. The waiting list could take years. Yes, it could. That's the reality of the situation. So you're just going to let him die because you're angry about how we handled this? I leaned against the doorframe, feeling tired. Maya, I'm not letting Walter die. Walter's addiction is killing Walter. I'm just refusing to enable it. How is giving him a kidney enabling his addiction? Because you're asking me to solve a problem that he created without him having to change anything about his behavior. That's the definition of enabling. Maya started crying again, and despite everything, my heart ached for her. She was my daughter, and she was in pain, but she was also an adult who had made choices that led to this situation. Dad, I know we lied to you. I know that was wrong, but Walter really is trying to get clean now. He's been going to meetings for 3 days. It's a start. Maya, 3 days isn't trying. 3 days is panic. Real recovery takes months, years, and it requires honesty, which neither of you seems capable of. That's not fair. What's not fair is using a 7-year-old child as your conscience. What's not fair is putting me through 2 weeks of medical tests and emotional manipulation. What's not fair is asking me to risk my health and my life to fix a problem that you and Walter created and refused to take responsibility for. Maya wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. So what happens now? You keep Tommy forever? You never speak to me again? I sighed. Maya, I don't want to never speak to you again. You're my daughter, and I love you, but I can't have a relationship with you while you're living in denial about Walter's addiction and your role in enabling it. What do you mean, my role? You've been covering for him for years, making excuses, hiding his problem, cleaning up his messes. You've been so focused on saving Walter that you've lost sight of what's best for Tommy and what's best for yourself. I'm trying to keep my family together. No, Maya. You're trying to keep the illusion of a family together. There's a difference. We stood there in silence for a moment, the weight of 2 decades of our relationship hanging between us. Finally, Maya spoke again. What would it take? For you to help Walter, I mean. I had been thinking about this question for 3 days. Walter would need to complete a residential treatment program. Not just a few weeks, but a real program, 90 days minimum. He'd need to attend regular support group meetings for at least 6 months after that. He'd need to get a sponsor and work the steps. And you'd need to go to counseling too, to learn how to stop enabling him. And then you'd give him your kidney. Then I'd consider it. If Walter could demonstrate that he was serious about recovery, if he could show 6 months of sobriety and real change, then we could revisit the transplant discussion. Maya's face crumpled. 6 months. Dad, he might not have 6 months. Then dialysis will have to keep him alive until he proves he's worth saving. The words came out harsher than I'd intended, and I immediately regretted them. But Maya's reaction surprised me. Instead of getting angry, she just looked defeated. You really think I'm a terrible mother, don't you? I think you're a mother who's been so focused on saving her husband that she's forgotten her responsibilities to her son. Tommy loves his father. Tommy loves the father he thinks Walter is. But Tommy also deserves to grow up in a house where the adults tell the truth and don't ask children to keep dangerous secrets. That evening, after Maya left, I sat down with Tommy while he did his homework at my kitchen table. His math worksheet was spread out in front of him, but he was more interested in drawing in the margins than solving the problems. Tommy, can we talk about something? He looked up, his pencil still in his hand. Am I in trouble? No, buddy, you're not in trouble. You did exactly the right thing at the hospital. But I want to make sure you understand what's happening with your mom and dad. Tommy set down his pencil and gave me his full attention. Dad's sick because he drinks too much, right? That's right, and drinking too much is called alcoholism. It's a disease, but it's also something that people can get help for if they want to. Does Dad want to get help? I think he wants to get better, but wanting to get better and actually doing the work to get better are 2 different things. Tommy nodded solemnly. Mom gets really scared when Dad drinks. I know she does, and that's not your job to worry about. That's not something a kid should have to think about. But I do think about it. My heart broke a little. I know you do, and that's normal. But while you're staying with me, you don't have to worry about taking care of your parents. That's my job now. Are Mom and Dad going to get divorced? It was a question I'd been dreading. Partly because I didn't know the answer, and partly because I wasn't sure it would be a bad thing if they did. I don't know, Tommy. Sometimes when people have big problems like your dad has, it's hard for families to stay together. But whatever happens between your mom and dad, it's not because of anything you did or didn't do. Tommy picked up his pencil again and started coloring in the margin of his worksheet. Grandpa Joe, if I live with you, can I still see Mom and Dad sometimes? Of course you can, as long as it's safe for you. What makes it not safe? Another difficult question. How do you explain to a 7-year-old that his home environment is unstable without making him feel responsible for fixing it? Well, sometimes when adults are dealing with big problems like addiction, they don't make very good decisions. They might say things or do things that aren't good for kids to be around. Like lying about Dad being sick. That's one example, yes. Tommy was quiet for a moment, considering this. Then he looked up at me with those wise eyes that seemed too old for his face. Grandpa Joe, I'm glad I told you the truth. I'm glad you told me the truth too, buddy. That night, after Tommy was asleep in my guest room, I sat on my back porch with a cup of coffee and finally allowed myself to really think about what had happened. 3 days ago, I'd been prepared to undergo major surgery to save a man I thought was my beloved son-in-law. Now I knew that man had never really existed, at least not for the past few years. The Walter I thought I knew, the hard-working, devoted husband and father, had been replaced by an addict who was willing to let his family manipulate his father-in-law into risky surgery rather than face his own problems. And Maya, my principled daughter who I'd raised to value honesty and integrity, had become someone I barely recognized. someone who would lie and scheme and put her own father's health at risk to avoid dealing with reality. But sitting there in the quiet darkness, I realized something else. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt peaceful. The constant low-level anxiety I'd been carrying around my family was gone. I wasn't wondering what crisis was coming next, what excuse I'd need to make for Walter's behavior, what problem I'd be asked to solve. Tommy was safe, sleeping soundly in my guest room. I was safe, no longer being manipulated into making decisions based on lies. And maybe, if Maya and Walter were forced to face their problems without me as a safety net, they might finally get the help they actually needed. My phone buzzed with a text message from Maya. "Dad, Walter checked himself into a treatment program today. 90 days, just like you said. Can we talk?" I stared at the message for a long time before responding. "Good, that's a start. Talk to me when he graduates." It felt like both an ending and a beginning. 6 months later, I was sitting in the same hospital where this whole ordeal had begun, but this time I was in the waiting room, not prepped for surgery. Walter had completed his 90-day treatment program and had been sober for 183 days. He'd been going to meetings religiously, had a sponsor, and was working a 12-step program. Maya had been attending counseling sessions and Al-Anon meetings to learn how to stop enabling his addiction. And now Walter was having surgery to receive a kidney from an anonymous donor who had died in a car accident 3 days earlier. Maya sat beside me, looking more like the daughter I remembered from years past. She'd gained back some weight, her hair was clean and styled, and there was a clarity in her eyes that had been missing for a long time. Tommy sat on her other side, reading a book about dinosaurs. "Dad, thank you for being here," Maya said quietly. "Of course I'm here. Walter is still family." And he was. The past 6 months had been difficult, with lots of hard conversations and painful honesty, but Walter had done the work. Real work. Not just promises. He'd been transparent about his addiction, his relapses, his struggles. He'd gotten a job at a different construction company and had been honest with them about his recovery. He'd started attending Tommy's school events again, not as the checked-out father he'd been, but as someone genuinely present and engaged. Most importantly, he'd stopped asking other people to fix his problems for him. "The surgeon said the operation should take about 4 hours, Maya said, checking her watch. "These things take time. Try not to worry. I keep thinking about how different things could have been if we'd just been honest with you from the beginning." I'd thought about that too. "Maya, you can't change the past. All you can do is make better choices going forward. Do you think you'll ever trust me again? Really trust me?" It was a question she'd asked me several times over the past months, and my answer was always the same. Trust isn't something you get back all at once. It's something you rebuild slowly, with consistent actions over time. I know. I just hate that I damaged our relationship so badly. The relationship we had before wasn't as healthy as I thought it was, I admitted. I was enabling your enabling. I was so focused on being the helpful father and grandfather that I never questioned whether my help was actually helpful. Maya looked surprised. "What do you mean?" "I mean that every time I bailed you and Walter out of a financial problem, every time I made excuses for his behavior, every time I stepped in to solve your problems, I was making it easier for you to avoid dealing with the real issues. You were just being a good father." "No, Maya, I was being a convenient father. There's a difference. A good father would have asked harder questions. A good father would have insisted on honesty and accountability." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the bustle of hospital activity around us. Finally, Maya spoke again. "Tommy's been different since he's been staying with you. Happier. He's been wonderful, but he misses you." "I know. And I miss him so much it physically hurts sometimes. But I also know he's better off with you right now." It had been one of the hardest decisions Maya had made during Walter's treatment. Agreeing that Tommy should continue living with me until their home environment was completely stable. But it was also one of the most mature decisions she'd ever made. "Maya, being a good mother sometimes means making choices that hurt you, but are best for your child. You're learning that. It doesn't feel like being a good mother. It feels like being a failure. The fact that you can admit you made mistakes and are working to fix them doesn't make you a failure. It makes you human." Dr. Stevens appeared in the waiting room doorway, still in his surgical scrubs. Maya immediately stood up, her face tense with anxiety. "The surgery went very well," he said with a smile. "The new kidney is functioning perfectly. Walter should make a full recovery." Maya burst into tears, but they were tears of relief this time, not desperation. Tommy jumped up and hugged her, and I felt my own eyes getting misty. When can we see him? Maya asked. He's still in recovery, but probably in about an hour. Fair warning, though. He's going to be groggy and uncomfortable for a few days. After Dr. Stevens left, Maya sat back down and wiped her eyes. I can't believe it actually worked out. For so long, I was convinced Walter was going to die because of my mistakes. Walter's addiction wasn't your mistake, Maya. Your mistake was thinking you could control it. I just wanted to save my family. And you did, just not the way you originally planned. When we were finally allowed to see Walter, he was awake but drowsy from the anesthesia. His face lit up when he saw Tommy, and I watched my grandson carefully approach his father's hospital bed. "Hi, Dad. How do you feel?" "Tired, but good," Walter said, his voice hoarse. "Really good. Grandpa Joe brought me to see you every day while you were in the treatment place." Walter looked at me over Tommy's head. "Joseph, I don't know how to thank you for everything you've done." "You don't need to thank me, Walter. You did the hard work yourself. I know what I put you through. What I put all of you through. If I could go back and change it." "Walter, you can't go back. None of us can. But you can keep moving forward." He nodded, then looked at Maya. "Have you told him about our decision?" Maya shook her head. "I wanted to wait until after the surgery." I looked between them. "What decision?" Maya took a deep breath. "Dad, Walter and I have been talking with our counselors about what's best for our family. We've decided that Tommy should continue living with you, at least for the next year." I felt a mix of emotions, surprise, concern, and if I was honest, relief. Tommy had settled into a routine with me, and he was thriving in the stability of it. "Are you sure about that?" "We're sure," Walter said. "I need to focus on my recovery without worrying about whether I'm being a good father, and Maya needs to figure out who she is when she's not covering for me. Tommy deserves better than parents who are still figuring out how to be healthy. Besides," Maya added, "he loves living with you. He talks about your Saturday morning pancakes and your fishing trips constantly." Tommy grinned. "Grandpa Joe lets me help make the pancakes, and he taught me how to tie fishing knots. Plus," Walter continued, "it gives us time to work on our marriage without putting pressure on Tommy to be okay with everything immediately." I looked at my grandson, who was sitting on the edge of Walter's hospital bed, chattering about a school project he was working on. The boy who 6 months ago had been keeping adult secrets and worrying about his parents' problems was now just being a kid. "Tommy, how do you feel about continuing to live with me?" I asked. "Can I still see Mom and Dad?" "Of course," Maya said. "We want to see you all the time. We'll have dinner together twice a week, and you can spend weekends with us when Dad gets stronger. And you promise no more secrets?" Maya and Walter exchanged a look. "No more secrets," Walter said solemnly. "Then I think it sounds good," Tommy said. "Grandpa Joe makes really good spaghetti." 2 weeks later, on a Saturday morning, I was standing in my kitchen making pancakes, while Tommy sat at the table doing a crossword puzzle. The newspaper was spread out between us, and morning sunlight was streaming through the windows. "Grandpa Joe, what's a 7-letter word for new beginning?" I thought for a moment while flipping a pancake. "Rebirth." "Rebirth, Tommy spelled out, carefully writing in the squares. "That fits." Maya arrived for our scheduled breakfast visit just as I was putting the pancakes on the table. She'd been coming over every Saturday morning for the past month, and the routine felt natural and comfortable. "How's Dad doing?" she asked, giving Tommy a hug and kiss. "Better," Tommy reported. "The doctor said his new kidney is working perfectly. And he's been going to his meetings," Maya added. "Every day, even when he doesn't feel like it." "How are you doing?" I asked Maya as I poured her coffee. "Good days and bad days," she said honestly. "Counseling is hard, learning to let Walter take responsibility for his own problems instead of trying to fix everything myself. But I'm learning." "Mom's going to college," Tommy announced proudly. "Just a few classes," Maya said, blushing slightly. "Accounting. I figure it's time I had some skills of my own instead of just depending on Walter's income." I felt a surge of pride for my daughter. She was finally building a life that didn't revolve entirely around managing someone else's problems. "That's wonderful, Maya. I'm proud of you. It feels good to have goals that are just mine, you know? Not about saving Walter or keeping the family together or fixing anything. Just something I want to do for myself." As we ate breakfast together, I watched the easy interaction between Maya and Tommy. She was relaxed in a way I hadn't seen in years, and Tommy was comfortable with the new arrangement. He knew he was loved and wanted by his parents, but he also knew he was safe and stable with me. "Dad, can I ask you something?" Maya said as Tommy went to get dressed for our planned trip to the zoo. Of course. Do you regret it? Setting all those boundaries, refusing to enable us? Part of me worries that if you'd just given Walter the kidney 6 months ago, we could have avoided a lot of pain. I considered her question carefully. Maya, if I'd given Walter my kidney 6 months ago, he'd probably be drinking again by now. The kidney would be damaged, and we'd be right back where we started. Except Tommy would have learned that lying and manipulation work when you're desperate enough. You really believe that? I know that. Because addiction doesn't get better when you remove the consequences. It gets better when people face the consequences and decide they're ready to change. And you think Walter's really changed? I think Walter is working very hard to change, every day, and that's all any of us can do. Tommy came running back into the kitchen, dressed and ready for our zoo adventure. As we gathered our things to leave, I caught Maya looking around my kitchen with a soft expression. "What are you thinking about?" I asked. "Just how peaceful it feels here now. For the longest time, every conversation we had was about some crisis or emergency. And now we're just talking about normal things. School and work and weekend plans. That's what happens when everyone stops keeping secrets and starts taking responsibility for their own problems." As we walked to the car, Tommy slipped his hand into mine and looked up at me with those wise brown eyes. "Grandpa Joe, I'm glad everything happened the way it did. Even the scary parts, because now everyone tells the truth and Dad is getting better and Mom is happy and I get to live with you and eat pancakes every Saturday." Sometimes, I thought as we drove toward the zoo, the best thing you can do for people you love is refuse to save them from themselves. It had taken me 59 years to learn that lesson, but it was worth the wait. Now I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below. And meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.